there's avenues of fear that I feel like we're not tapping into. I think we keep going back to the same well. A lot of that is shock, and a lot of that is gore, and a lot of that is jump scares. And there are a lot of games that are doing it great, but I'm more interested in trying to, because when it comes down to it, the thing that resonates the most with me as a gamer and as a creator, I just love, being whisked away.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for agreeing to talk to us for a little bit about Perception. So, like I was saying, why don't you begin by introducing yourself and telling us your role at Deep End Games?
Sure. So I'm Bill Gardner, and I'm the founder and creative director at the Deep End Games. And we're working on Perception, which we were lucky enough to show up at Boston Festival of Indie Games, and really, really psyched about the reaction. Obviously, we won the two awards for narrative and best in show.
Right.
But really psyched about just being able to interact with the gamers, and just being able to really get feedback and get the reactions, and just jot down notes about what what we can do to improve things. And it's just, it's my first time going to BFIG. I'm embarrassed to say. There's always something going on in my life, but this year, obviously, I made it a point. And I'm so glad I did, because it's just an amazing show. It really is.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to be this big or this well organized, or like you always expect enthusiasm and all that, but it's just a great show. And so I'm going to be going every year from now on.
Nice. So why don't you give us the convention pitch for Perception? Give us a little, tease on what the game is for those who haven't seen it.
Sure, absolutely. So Perception is a first-person narrative horror game where you play as a blind woman named Cassie. And Cassie uses echolocation to see, like bats, essentially. And as it turns out, that's actually something that a number of blind people actually do. Like, we've been lucky enough to meet, I don't know if you happen to catch, there was a TED Talk earlier last year from a man named Daniel Kish, who teaches blind people how to use echolocation. And he himself is blind, and he teaches them how to use this echolocation, and he mountain bikes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
That's incredible.
And so we originally had the idea for the game, and started doing some research just to make sure that we understood enough about the source material, and make sure that we're doing things right. And when we discovered him, I was like, wow, we need to see if we can talk with him. And we were lucky enough to have dinner with him, and sort of chat with him a bit about the game, and just what we're trying to do, and what echolocation is like, and just blindness in general, and accessibility. And so it was amazing, amazing experience. And it's really helped inform the game. And but anyway, so a lot of things to talk about here, but again, the general gist is a narrative horror game where you you play as Cassie, and you're being called to this house. You have these visions, these nightmares of this mansion, and as it turns out, after months and months of research, you discover that it's a real place. And you first chance you get, she jumps on a plane from Phoenix to Gloucester, Mass, where the mansion is. And she winds up impulsively showing up on the front steps and being like, why am I being called here? What is it about this place? And she starts poking around, and winds up getting swept up in this mystery of what happened here. What's the history of this house? And as you answer that question, as you piece together through clues found in the mansion of notes, and there's audio recordings and ghosts, in very Bioshock-y kind of way. That's my background. I worked in the Bioshock series. You piece together what happened, and when you answer that, you wind up jumping back in time, and the house shifts. It changes. You swap characters, and the geometry and the architecture changes a bit, and that everything within the house changes, and so once again, you're left trying to figure out what happened. And a lot of it is, at the very beginning, it says inspired by a true story. I can't really get into too much without spoiling things, but there's a piece that, there's a number of pieces that tie into the history of the area of Massachusetts, but then also, a little bit of my personal family history as well. And I hate that I can't talk about it, but hopefully it's worth it. I think it is. Once you finally get a chance to play it.
Something we'll look forward to.
Sure.
So I think the thing that is immediately attention grabbing about Perception is this echolocation. It certainly was for me the first time I saw it. It's not
Sure.
like something I'd seen in any other game. It's very cool. And I wanted to kind of find out where that mechanic came from and kind of how it developed.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
it's got a very striking blue tone to the entire thing. Was it always
Yes.
blue, or is that something that kind of you went through a couple different iterations on? How
No,
did that
that's
all come to be?
that's a good question. So the aesthetic, that was difficult to sort of first of all research to figure out what what that might look like in terms of what do blind people, what is their experience like, what are their perceptions like, what are their senses, what sort of does that feel like. And there's all kinds of wonderful YouTube videos. There's the blind film critic, I believe is his name. It's been a while since I've watched his videos, but he describes a lot about his perception of the world, and in particular, he has videos where he actually tries to draw. What was interesting to me was that it hadn't really occurred to me, but he had said that it's often difficult for blind people to understand like 2D. And so when he draws, it's difficult for him to kind of really, because you think about it, his experience is 3D. It's through feel, and so to think about things in a flat plane, and this aligns with a lot of psychology. Not that I'm a psychologist or whatever, but like as far as that there are people who, when they perceive the sort of rectilinear world we live in for the first time, people who don't necessarily live in houses, when they live in I don't know, in the forest or what, to sound crude here, but when you talk about different styles of different lifestyles, there's difficult to perceive the world in these interesting ways. And so that was part of the driving force behind creating the game was Amanda, my wife, and the game's writer and producer, we're always kicking around ideas for new stories and for new ideas for games, but particularly for horror games. And so the idea of like playing a scary game where you can't see, where you're blind, that initially had such a draw to me, not only because we thought that could be scary, but also because it's an opportunity to show the world in a different perspective, and that's very important. I've been in games for, I don't know, about 15 years or so now, and I will always love making games, and I don't think I'll ever get bored of it because it's magic, right? I mean, everything, you're putting magic on the screen, but there's a tendency to kind of always put the same kind of perspective, the same perfect vision, 6 foot whatever tall dude with beefy arms, and that's fine. I love games like that, but at the same time, I think there's opportunity to do new cool stuff, and so it's one of those rare projects for me where everything really clicks together really nicely. Like the answers. I mean, it's not saying it's an easy project to work on, but we're coming from the BioShock series where so much of that was, blood, sweat, and tears in terms of trying to figure out, you talk about every single plasmid or every single vigor in the game and how that ties into the fiction of that world, and then how that ties into the characters. And you have to work so hard to make that fit. In this, so much of the aesthetic, like you were asking before, so much of the narrative and the way that the systems work and all that sort of thing, it sort of, a lot of the questions kind of answer themselves, and executing on them is difficult. And so
talk about that, the execution, because that was kind of leading into my next question was,
sure.
When I was thinking about this, I thought, well, in some ways this is going to be a little bit more forgiving because you don't have to necessarily build quite as much as the textures where you're only seeing the outlines.
It's true.
But then,
it's true.
Do you have to be a lot more precise in those outlines? Building this world with this different way of seeing it in mind, what kind of challenges did that present?
No, that's right on. I think that was part of the when I said things clicked together, and that was part of the appeal of the project was that it allowed us a lot of really tight focus. We didn't have to take on every single battle that you think about with normal games. It allowed us for the opportunity to have a unique, not only perspective, but unique aesthetic. And so that could be the focus, the aesthetic, the effects, lighting, things like that, instead of like, okay, well, how high poly is this object?
Right.
How many texture, how many layers does it have? Talk to me about how it's reflective maps and all that sort of thing. And it's just like, I'm not interested in engaging that for right now. I love tech. I love to see cutting edge video game, but at the same time, there are always going to be people out there who are going to do that better, especially in the AAA space, right? They're just going to crush you. So I feel like you have to come at it from a different angle. Yeah. You have to bring something new. And so to get the look right, there was a whole lot of experimentation, but there was also a lot of research into, again, what theoretically, blindness feels like. Inevitably there were some, you have to look at things like how it's been portrayed in media, and like everyone always brings up Daredevil, and frankly, I think there's something about echolocation and sonar and a lot of sort of seeing through sound and seeing through non-traditional means. For some reason, that's always evocative of blues. You had asked about the blues.
Yeah.
But I think it also, again, I think that also really helps and enhances a lot of the isolation and a lot of the themes that we're going for in the game. And I think a lot of the fear, I think there's, for some reason, blues that naturally sits in that space. And so, again, things really kind of click together. And so, yeah, tons of experimentation, and it was difficult because you don't really know how to look this stuff up. I spoke with a lot of accessibility experts, a lot of blind people, and I had to actually lean on things like in terms of visualizing the way that we call it tapping, when you actually use your cane to tap and create the sound itself. Found all kinds of really good reference videos from Slur in Physics, which is where it's essentially visualizing a lot of things that you normally wouldn't be able to see, heat and sound and all that sort of thing. And so you'll see people who are putting light up or showing the visualizations of a candle, the heat from a candle, or a hair dryer. It honestly looks like you dive into a pool, water kind of splashes out, and really underwater, that is. When you actually turn a hairdryer on, it looks very similar to that, and so there's a little bit of inspiration from a lot of interesting, obscure physics and that sort of thing. So it's just kind of trying to draw from all kinds of different spots. But it's a lot of fun, I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's cool, and it's cool to see that there is a lot of real world kind of backing to this aesthetic.
You try to, cool. Yeah, you try to. I mean, that's something that I think that Ken Levine, the creative director at Irrational, beat into my head, just about, or all our heads really, just about, it's got to pass the smell test. You have to do your research and do your homework, because okay, so look, BioShock is a ridiculous game, right? It's a city at the bottom of the sea, but we did enough and so with the whole genetics and the whole plasmid thing, but we did enough research to be like, okay, yeah, that's it's always about suspension of disbelief, right?
Right.
And we are not making a simulation in perception, but I think what we're interested in is creating a lot of that feeling and creating hopefully awareness of what that might be like to use echolocation. But again, we're not. If we were doing a simulation, we'd be showing a whole lot less information,
right.
And I think that's important to capture the feeling and to try and stay true enough to the source. But at the same time, it is meant to be an entertaining product, and make it so that if you're not going to play the game, then what's the point, right?
Right. So shifting from that mechanic to the horror element, one thing that I think was shown in the trailers of Perception and some of the gameplay you've put out that I thought would be really interesting to ask you about from a design perspective was kind of that ratio or the discussion of how much everyday horror, I'm going to call it, you put in there versus supernatural. Because there's very clearly supernatural elements in Perception.
Yep, absolutely.
But there's also being blind.
Yep.
There's things
absolutely.
that happen in the everyday that are going to affect you in a different way, that are going to
absolutely.
Be scary in a way that wouldn't necessarily be to somebody that was using sight as opposed to echolocation. How did you balance that? Again, obviously no spoilers or anything like that, but what kind of thought process went into that?
So, you start out by looking at your touchstones and your inspirations, and for me, in terms of film, I'm a big Carpenter fan, but I'm also a huge, more than anything else, a Kubrick fan.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of the feel of the game comes from that slow burn, that tension building, that really like pacing things out and letting things simmer. I think jump scares are kind of a dirty word, particularly in games now. It's horror. There's going to be those, and we have a few of them for sure. But at the same time, it's much more about your just that vulnerability and that isolation and that feeling of. And again, I mentioned Carpenter. Like you look at The Thing, for example, the isolation in that, and very similar to the isolation in The Shining, and that paranoia of anything could be a threat. And like the place of the Overlook Hotel in The Shining is like. That's a huge touchstone for me, just because I love the film, but it's also, it translates, I think, so well to a video game where the world is so dense and lived in, and like, even though you're just walking down these completely vacant halls and all the stuff is packed away, all the furniture is tucked away in the corner, and it just teems atmosphere and it teems history, and that at any given point, someone could walk down the hall right at you, or you have the twins down the hall, or coming in the elevator, and stuff that happens there. And that's what I want. I really want the place to permeate history, and so a lot of that comes from audio, a lot of that comes from the mise en scène, setting up vignettes to fill the space and to tell the story. But I think that. So you start off with those principles, and then you look to other sources like in other games. There's Silent Hill 2, and honestly, going back to like Super Metroid even. And
sure.
Did you play Inside, by the way?
I did, yeah.
So good, right?
Very good, very good.
So playing that, again reminded me that I think a lot of times particularly in games, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that the audience trusts you, and it's very tempting to go in and put more and crank it up to 11 and not let your audience lean in, and see what is that? What am I hearing? What am I seeing? I think Inside did that brilliantly.
I was just going to say that's a great example to bring up, because Inside did a very good job of doing that, where it didn't show you a lot of things up until the end.
Right.
You were almost by necessity drawn in because you wanted to figure out what was going on. I get.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of my favorite games of the year for sure. And so I think the horror itself is primarily in that space. It's primarily in the isolation, the paranoia, the what's around the next corner, but also what's 10 feet in front of me. The fear can be everywhere. And frankly, that this was something that would have worked out, but it was something that I kind of wish we could have explored a little bit in BioShock. But again, it would have been a very different game. The being in the ocean, like out in the ocean, like where fear is, like terror and doom is all around you, 360 degrees, right? I wish we could have explored that, but that's not what the game was about, and I'm very happy with the way it turned out, obviously. But there's avenues of fear that I feel like we're not tapping into. I think we keep going back to the same well. A lot of that is shock, and a lot of that is gore, and a lot of that is jump scares. And there are a lot of games that are doing it great, but I'm more interested in trying to, because when it comes down to it, the thing that resonates the most with me as a gamer and as a creator, I just love being whisked away. I know that's the thing we always talk about is immersion. But the reality is, I don't feel like there's that many people that really go after it.
Yeah.
And that's my goal, is to really go after that immersion, and I hope to capture a lot of that same feeling I felt when I first played Super Metroid, or I first played Mario 64, or I first played System Shock 2, or Inside, or the first time I played Inside, where the whole world just melts away, and I'm there being like, just there. I'm in that space, and I can actually feel myself physically get ripped back into reality when something distracts me, if something falls over or something like something in the room, and actually feel that my gut getting pulled back. I'm like, oh yeah, you're in the real world. That's the kind of thing I want to create.
Well, I think you're definitely getting there with Perception. So moving from Perception to you as a developer, you kind of touched a little bit. Obviously, your background's in BioShock, but what led you to independent development from AAA development?
So after Irrational, I spent a little bit of time helping some other developers out, helping some friends out with their projects. And, if I'm being honest, despite all the experience that I had, I was a little gun shy about coming into the industry in the indie scene and sort of running my own company. It's daunting. It can be terrifying. And I look, honestly, a huge piece of inspiration for me and giving me the go-ahead. I remember, obviously this was after the fact, but in terms of assurances, actually came from BFIG, years past, and seeing the announcements of who won, and seeing all the games that came through, and then you look at just the I don't want to say deluge, but all the games that have come out in the indie space and all the amazing things that's happening. For me, it gave me the confidence. And when I had this concept, it became this kind of thing where we started building these prototypes. Amanda and I started kicking around story ideas. I went to Jim, and he started doing a few sounds here and there. I had Rob Waters do some concept work for the presents and all this, and it just started building up and building up. And before I knew it, I was like, again, I kept making excuses. Like, well, maybe we won't do this. Maybe we won't do this. And then finally, after about 3 or 4 months, I was like, put in a lot of time, put in a lot of money, and I put in a lot of effort. And I was like, who am I kidding? I love this. I love this concept. I love the idea. I just need to suck it up and that confidence, man. That's the toughest piece. And so finally, I looked at what I had and what was going on in the industry, and sort of everyone that had been everyone I knew formerly of Irrational, and all. I decided I was going to hit Kickstarter, and started building our trailers and demos and all that the gameplay, and it kind of felt like one of those things where I was dying to do it, and I knew it, but I kept putting up barriers for myself, and eventually I was like, I'm in this thing, and like I was lucky enough to have that time to commit without actually committing. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I get what you mean.
So I don't recommend my particular path or approach, but the bottom line is I think the important thing is I was doing it, and that's the most important thing. I hear a lot of people talking about indie. Going indie, creating their own game, which you just have to do it. You just have to set, like, well, even if it's, the other part of my problem was that I was looking at all the things. I knew what I had to do. I knew all the PR I had to do. I know the marketing I had to do, all the tech and the business stuff I had to do, the websites and all that. And I was like incorporating and all this. And I was like, oh my God, I'm completely overwhelmed. And the only way I could do it personally, as someone who's easily distracted, was to just start just nailing stuff down and setting up small goals. And I wouldn't bother looking at the giant list of things that I needed to do, and just say, like, I'm just going to this week, I'm just going to do these things. That's it. That's all that matters. No, don't think about it. And that may sound like obvious.
It's good advice, though. It's good advice.
It's amazingly simple and obvious, but for me, it was what got me through it.
Yeah. So you mentioned Inside, but what other games have you been playing recently? We indie developers are gamers too. We like to find out what they like playing. So what else has been on your to play list?
Sure. So I just recently, a few weeks ago, got 20XX, the Mega Man X inspired game, and so actually I'm super stoked because I now have an Alienware Steam box. There's one of the awards for a game of show, and so I'm playing all these games on my TV now. I've actually never done that. I've never played Steam games on my TV. I'm okay, not personally, but I've been to friends' houses and that sort of thing. So I'm pretty excited about that.
That's
so 20XX is pretty awesome. I'm trying to think what else.
Fantastic game. We've covered them a lot, and we did an interview with their developers.
Oh really? I missed that.
It's fantastic.
Cool. Yeah. Right. Just top notch, right? They really nailed the feel, the animation. I think they do some interesting things with the mechanics, with the dashing and all that. Just great stuff.
Good times.
It was kind of one of those things where I discovered it, for myself a few weeks back, and I was like, why hasn't anyone told me about this? See what? Oh man, I'm drawing a blank here. I'm actually quite behind. I still haven't played The Witcher 3. I still haven't played. I'm probably gonna. I hate to say it, but I'm probably gonna play some of the BioShock collection today, just because I haven't touched it in a while. I say I play everything, and then I can't think of anything. I'm trying to think with the kids. I honestly play a lot of the Wii U with my sons. I think it's a great system. I really do. Some great stuff on there. I'm really drawing a blank. I played a little bit of NHL 17. I'm pretty psyched about that. I don't play a ton of sports games, but again, I play everything, and hockey's my favorite sport. And so picked up a little more of the Flame of the Flood.
Mm-hmm.
I like to play that in really small doses over time. Like I'll pick it up like once every couple of weeks, and I'll just like I sort of focus on committing myself to really surviving,
Mm-hmm.
and then I sort of let it go away, and then I resurrect myself a few weeks later.
To pull things to a close, what other developers are out there? And I'm sure you've probably got quite a few just coming off of Boston Festival of Indie Games.
Right.
What developers are out there that you think are just doing something really cool or really innovative that people might not have heard of that you think is worth checking out?
Might not have heard of. Again, it was overwhelming.
Yeah, I know.
It's and one of the ones they actually weren't showing there, but again, I'm a big fan of party games and family games and that sort of thing. I was really impressed by. I met one of the developers from Ultimate. Well, it's not the name of the company, but the game is Ultimate Chicken Horse. Have you heard of that? Yeah.
Yes.
Have you played it? Or?
Yeah, I have. It's great fun. It's one of those games that really does well with very little on its side. Like the players generate so much of the content in that game,
right?
That it's great.
Right.
They basically give you the tools to have a good time.
Right. Absolutely. That's exactly it. I mean, and then by extension, when I was at GDC last year, it didn't come out. I forget when it actually came up, but have you played Runbow? It's kind of similar.
I haven't played Runbow.
So it's on. I don't know what else it's on, but I know it's on. It's a WiiWare game.
Mm-hmm.
But just in terms of the UI and the presentation and the just the overall design and simplicity, it's a really sharp game. It's a racing game where it's up to 4 people, and you're essentially it's a sort of an endless runner, side-scrolling endless runner. That's a race game, and they're flashing all these colors, and depending on what color the whole screen flashes, you have different ways to jump and different platforms to jump on and that sort of thing. But it's just it's amazingly intuitive, and they're doing some really impressive communication with the player that I thought was really really impressive. So I dig that, and I play that quite a bit with my kids. Trying to think what else. It's just so many things. What was the ballet one again? What's that called?
Play Ballet?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But really impressed with that. They were the booth right behind ours, and I didn't get a chance to play it. But every time when I would walk by really quick, I'd take a peek, and I was like, it just looks really cool, and just people are having a blast playing it. So, but yeah, in terms of ones that people haven't heard of, I'm trying to think. It's terrible because it put me on the spot. I forgot. I forgot them all. It's overwhelming.
No, it's good.
Yeah, and obviously, there's really a lot of ones that people have heard. I'm really looking forward to actually tonight. I'm hoping to sit down and play We Happy Few. Did you guys chance to play that? Or
I have played a little bit of that. I haven't played it since the latest patch, but I played it a bunch back a ways, especially when it was first starting.
Sure.
It was a seller for me from the aesthetic alone, let alone
the
right? Mechanics.
Right. Yeah. That's what I love about indie right now is that there's so many people taking bold aesthetic choices, right? It kind of harkens back to the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games where you had to, before things got really super AAA polished and budgets through the roof, you had to sell based on the fact that we have extreme technical limitations and we have a small budget. So we have to really stand out by making bold moves, and
that's true.
You see that now. I think a lot of times the constraints are sometimes your best friend, And I think that those existed up until the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360. I mean, they still existed, but they swelled so much that it was realistically you could pretty much do what you wanted on those consoles. Before that, you had all these constraints, and now I feel like with the indie space the way it is, you have a small team, you have a small budget, and you just can't you can't compete with AAA, so you have to find interesting ways. Things like I mentioned Runbow, they're just making really bold statements with their visuals, and it's just got to resonate, it's got to read, and it's got to pop off the screen right away. Because in the indie space, you saw it at the convention. You're walking around, and it's got to be like pop. What's that? You have to ask that.
You have to have something that grabs you. You have to have something that set you apart. Awesome.
So amazing stuff.
Yeah,
I love the space, and I love the convention, and just so much fun. So much fun stuff going on.
Absolutely. Well, Bill Gardner of Deep End Games, thank you for talking to us about Perception, and congratulations on your awards from the Boston Fig.
Thank you.
Please keep us in the know.
You bet.
And
absolutely.
Thank you for talking to us.
Thanks.